Hey guys, it's Rob here and welcome back to another video. So in this video we do have some pretty interesting things to talk about when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. There's some pretty bad news for Nintendo Switch 2 transfers of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The Mig Switch is doing some pretty interesting things to the Nintendo Switch 2. Sony has come out and said some things when it comes to competition with Nintendo, and some other Nintendo Switch 2 news, as well as a Nintendo Direct announced for Donkey Kong Bananza. So let's talk about it, because especially when it comes to that Nintendo Direct, I think there's a conversation that a lot of people are having right now when it comes to the June Nintendo Direct. If you guys end up enjoying this video, make sure you guys leave a like. It helps the video reach more viewers when you do that a lot. And of course, if you want more Nintendo Switch 2 news, leaks, and rumors, subscribe to the channel and have that bell on, because sometimes YouTube doesn't bring these videos to you guys. So the Nintendo Switch 2 has been pretty fantastic in my personal experience. I do have some problems with it, especially when it comes to things like game key cards. But overall, I would say it's definitely a nice upgrade over the original Nintendo Switch. And one thing about the Nintendo Switch 2 that I think some people did use is the Mig Switch. This is basically a cartridge that allows you to play copies of your Nintendo Switch 2 games, ROMs, on the Nintendo Switch 1. Now, when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2, yes, it is possible in some way, shape, or form to use it with the Nintendo Switch 2, but some pretty interesting things have been happening with it. So we have an article by tomshardware.com, and the title of the article is, "After 12 days, Nintendo is already nuking Switch 2 console accounts for players getting caught using Mig Switch. Popular cartridge allows Switch 1 games on the new console, but users say they're only using their own ROMs." Now, they also say that affected users are being barred from using online services on the console for now. And right off the bat, I think a lot of people who do use the Mig Switch, let's be honest, they're doing so they can play free Nintendo Switch games. I think that's the majority of users, in my personal opinion. I could be wrong, and I know there are people who do use copies of the Nintendo Switch games they already own, but let's be honest here. One of the things that people use the R4 for instance, was probably to play emulated Nintendo DS games, and not ones they specifically own. Maybe they did a mix of the both, but for the most part, people who bought the R4s back in the day definitely did not copy a lot of their games that they already own. They just downloaded the ROMs from online. With that being said, let's continue with this article. So this is what the article says. Various user reports suggest that Nintendo is actively issuing bans to Switch 2 consoles that have been used with the Mig Switch, now Mig Flash card. Several affected users have reached out on X, formerly Twitter, and Reddit, sharing accounts of their consoles being banned from Nintendo, or from using Nintendo's online services after using the device. Now, again, I think a lot of people who are just using their own ROMs to play on the Nintendo Switch 2 of games they already own, I think I'm personally fine with that. But the people who, for the most part, are using it from download ROMs that they don't own, that they get online, that's illegal. And it's not like these games aren't available at all. You can go to GameStop and buy them. You can buy them online. They're not scalped like 3DS games or DS games or any other classic Nintendo games. For the majority, when people do use the Mig Switch, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people are downloading these ROMs online to play on their Nintendo Switch. It's the same thing with the R4. A lot of people use that to download the ROMs online and play it on their Nintendo Switch. And when it comes to current hardware that Nintendo is actively developing for, and they do plan on continuing to support the Nintendo Switch 1, the fact that bans are happening is kind of no surprise. They already know what happened with the 3DS and the DS, so why wouldn't they put something in place to stop people from doing that? I do have to say, for the people who are using it the way you're supposed to be using it, the legal way, backing up your own games, that's fine. That's something that you should be able to do, because it's your game. But anyways, continuing with the article. Despite earlier reports suggesting otherwise, Mig Flash, formerly Mig Switch, showcased Nintendo Switch 1 ROMs running on Switch 2 hardware. This functionality is believed to be achieved through a recent firmware update, which mitigated or bypassed whatever new security checks Nintendo introduced within the latest console. They also do go into how exactly they are finding out that these are pirated games. They say, that being said, it isn't as simple as dumping pirated copies on a Mig Switch and calling it a day, since Nintendo has a robust anti-piracy measure in place, often through unique cartridge identifiers. If two users attempt to play the same game online simultaneously using a single copy, Nintendo can flag this as piracy. As you expect, this will likely be led to many false positives, especially in the case of a used cartridge. And they go on to say that Nintendo has gotten even more stricter than before, and now people are being banned, like we covered in the beginning of this article. So my overall thoughts is that, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. This is a new console. Nintendo probably doesn't want people, pirating their games, especially Nintendo Switch 2 games. I think the part where I kind of find it iffy is where people are actually using it as a legal way. Like the guy over on Twitter says, my Switch 2 has been banned after using Mig Switch with perfectly legal dumps of my own cartridges. I think then people shouldn't get banned because that's perfectly legal. But I think when it comes to the amount of people who are using it this way, the legal way versus the illegal way, I think people are definitely downloading ROMs offline and playing them on the Nintendo Switch 1 back then when the Switch 2 wasn't even released, and now that the Switch 2 is out, they're probably trying to do the same thing. Unfortunately, now on both sides, they're both getting banned. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about that down in the comment section below. Do you not like that people are getting banned for this? Do you like that people are getting banned on it, and that means that all of these pirates are now getting punished? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Moving on to the bad news part of this video. So people who are playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, if you do transfer your stuff over to the Nintendo Switch 2, there is a possibility that you might run into some trouble. And as an RPG fan and someone who has played Pokemon in the past and spent a lot of hours in some of these Pokemon games, if I lost all that data, I would be kind of angry. At the very least, very disappointed. So Go Nintendo has an article that says Pokemon Scarlet and Violet players are losing saves during Switch 2 transfer process. And let me know if you ran into any problems with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet down in the comment section below. I'm kind of curious on how widespread this is. I mean, I know a lot of people do spend a lot of time in Pokemon games, especially people who do something like shiny hunting. I mean, there are people who have spent hundreds of hours just trying to find one Pokemon. So if you transfer that and then you lose it and you lose all of that after like maybe, I don't know, a Pokemon that you spent a lot of time trying to shiny hunt for, I mean, that would really tick me off. This is what Go Nintendo had to say. There are millions of Switch 2 owners out there right now, and it's quite likely many of them had an original Nintendo Switch. Going one step further, there's no doubt that thousands of Switch owners who made the jump to Switch 2 were also Pokemon Scarlet and Violet players. For most, transferring Switch content over to Switch 2, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet saves included, went without a hitch. For a select few, the process couldn't have gone worse, I mean. Go on to say that digging through Reddit, they found some chunks of people who fired up the Switch to Switch 2 process only to be horrified to realize that their Pokemon Scarlet and Violet saves didn't make the transition. Now, since then, according to Go Nintendo, there hasn't been any word on why exactly this is happening, but it is clear that some data is being lost, and in my opinion, this is actually pretty bad if Nintendo doesn't somehow go and fix this. Even if it's a small amount of people, the more times people do this over time, it's going to become a problem. And who knows, if it goes unchecked, maybe it can get even worse. So I hope Nintendo definitely does look into this, because if, let's say someone still is waiting to get that Switch 2 and like a year later they finally get the Switch 2 and they've built up like a year more of data and they transfer it over and then they lose it, I mean, that would completely suck, especially when it comes to a lot of different JRPGs, RPGs, games that you spend a lot of time in, like Cyberpunk 2077 or Witcher 3, things like that. If that gets lost, that's not going to be good, especially coming to a new platform that Nintendo needs to push and make sure it goes really, really well. Now, they do say that you can back up some of the saves on Pokemon Home, so that's good. There's always a second option, but I'm sure some people completely lost their data, which really sucks. Let me know how your transfer process went with the Nintendo Switch 2. Mine went pretty fine. I honestly opted in to get a pretty fresh start. There are some games that I did transfer over when it comes to the data, but for the most part, there are some games where I'm like, you know what? Might as well play through again, right? Then, of course, there's those games where it's like you buy it and then it goes into your back catalog after you played a bit because another game comes out. With that being said, let's talk about the next topic. Shuei Yoshida has come out and said how they view Nintendo when it comes to competition. So this is what Stealth40k over on Twitter has to say. Sony doesn't view Nintendo as competition except for in Japan. Inside Sony, even when they do a business analysis, Nintendo doesn't show up. There's a competition market share between PlayStation and Xbox, and somehow they don't include Nintendo. Not that they're ignoring Nintendo, but they don't necessarily feel Nintendo is competition because Nintendo is covering a different audience. And to be honest, with the Nintendo Switch 2, I think that kinda has changed a bit, especially since Nintendo is playing with more power now. Obviously not as much power as Sony and Xbox, but they are definitely in competition when it comes to visuals. Not so much in terms of, oh, which visuals are better, but in terms of, hey, that does look pretty fantastic, even on a handheld console. Maybe I want to get that instead of the PlayStation version. Like when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077, there is definitely an argument of, hey, why don't I just get this Nintendo Switch 2 version instead? That way I can play it on the go and on TV, and it looks pretty fantastic, even when compared to the PS5 version. In my opinion, it doesn't matter what these businesses say. The fact is, they're fighting for our dollar, especially now with the Nintendo Switch 2 and it being more powerful. There are going to be times where you have to think, should I get this for the Switch 2 or should I get it for the PS5? That is direct competition for your dollar. Whatever these companies say don't really matter, right? It just depends on exactly what it is. What is the reality of what people are choosing and what do they have to choose between? And if there is an instance of someone choosing between two consoles for a version of the game, well then that is direct competition, right? I don't know how else you would even put that. And in my opinion, this is very good because this is just going to make other competitors even more competitive, and it's just going to be overall better for us players. Healthy competition is healthy, you know? And the last thing I want to talk about is something that I found pretty interesting when it comes to the new Metal Gear Solid remake. So over on Twitter, Genki_Japan has this to say: Metal Gear Solid Delta will have 2 game modes, new style, over-the-shoulder camera, and modern controls, legacy style, OG style bird-eye camera, visual filter, and classic controls. You can select the color filter on new style mode as well. I just thought that was pretty cool. I always like when games, especially when it comes to RPG games, I'm a big stealth fan too. That's why I'm really enjoying Assassin's Creed Shadows. I really do like the stealth in that game. Not perfect, of course, but it is pretty enjoyable. I like when they kind of harken back to the older style of games and give you the option between the two. If I recall, one of the Dragon Quest games did that, right? Oh, and I almost forgot about so that's not the last topic. The last topic is the Nintendo Direct stuff for Pokemon Donkey Kong Bananza. So at the time of this recording, you'll probably have already watched the Donkey Kong Bananza Nintendo Direct, but Nintendo has announced a Nintendo Direct for Donkey Kong Bananza, and this has brought the conversation up of, are we still getting that June Nintendo Direct? Now, Nintendo usually does do a June Nintendo Direct in the back half of June, so I would say there is still a chance, and that's why I'm still including it in this, even though the Nintendo Direct would have already passed. I will be doing my own video on that when that happens, breaking down all the gameplay details and all that kind of stuff, so make sure you subscribe for that. I will have a separate video, probably already out by the time this is released. I think I'm gonna release it today. It'll be like a 3 to 4 minute video just discussing on whether or not a Nintendo Direct could still happen because of Donkey Kong Bananza. But really quick, I do want to cover that news. So there is going to be a Nintendo Direct, and that's going to be tomorrow on the 18th. And this is going to be 15 minutes long, and that's also going to be at 6 a.m. PT and EST. I think that's 9 a.m. I think, right? 3 hours later. Now, one thing I do hope is that we actually do learn new things about the game. One thing that I really didn't like about the Mario Kart Direct that we got was the fact that there wasn't really a lot of new stuff shown, according to people who watched it. So I hope this new one definitely gives us a lot more looks at the game, tells us more about the mechanics, the story, and overall, like, what exactly is going on with Donkey Kong Bananza. But if you were to ask me, well, does that mean there's going to be a Nintendo Direct in June later this month? I think there is still a chance. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about this down in the comment section below. If you've already watched the Nintendo Direct for Donkey Kong Bananza, which is going to be an hour after this is released, or after the Direct is released, let me know what you think about the Nintendo Direct that you probably just watched. And do you think we're going to get a June Nintendo Direct still? Also, what do you think about the competition between Nintendo and Sony? Do you think they are in direct competition or not? And of course, how are your transfer saves going over, especially when it comes to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.